when we do the investment function, we call that purposeful investing. And what I absolutely love about it is we are looking for opportunities that have both profit or income potential, but more importantly, they have a strong mission focus.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we got successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. And we believe that the key to scaling and compounding your wealth, faith, and life starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. Hey, my name is Brett Swarts, and each and every episode I'm joined by some of the best entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires on this show, and we're going to dive in and figure out their secrets, their wisdom, and their impact to be inspired and to move forward to make a bigger difference in this world. I'm excited about our next guest. In fact, he's got a really kind of tremendous background. I'm going to read his bio for you guys here, and he has a really creative, dynamic background. In fact, he is the CEO of the Tebow Group. The Tebow Group exists to fuel and amplify faith, hope, and love in support of some of the most vulnerable people, the real MVPs around the globe. The Tebow Group, founded by Tim and Demi Tebow, focuses on purposeful investing with the goal of helping great people and great companies to go further faster. Prior to leading the Tebow Group, this guest founded and led and exited multiple nationwide financial firms, including private funds, broker-dealers, RIAs, and insurance agencies, collectively managing over $2 billion for high-net-worth families. For his work in the financial service industry, he was named Investment News' inaugural list of top 40 advisors under 40. He's also named one of the top 8 visionaries who will pull the financial service industry into the next stratum, and so much more. Real quick, he's also alumni of Harvard's Business School. Please welcome to the show with me, Tommy Martin. Tommy, how are we doing?
Doing great, Brett. Thanks for the intro. I wish I still qualified for that 40 under 40 thing, but man, the years just keep climbing up. So
Father Time, man, catches up with us all, right?
That's right.
So how old are you today? And by the way, tell us a little bit about your story and your focus, and the kids get that laid out.
Sure. Yeah. Sitting here at age 44 now. Been married for 23 years. Met my wife my freshman year of college.
Where'd you go to college?
What's that?
Where'd you go to college?
Started out at a Christian college in Indiana called Taylor University.
Okay.
And I was, we had this thing called Spiritual Emphasis Week. And as a freshman, the way it worked was you had to go to chapel every day of the week. And it was the exact same speaker every day. So as a freshman, I thought that was cruel and unusual punishment. I'm like, it's the same speaker every day.
Yeah.
Well, I went. And that Monday, he was amazing. He was phenomenal. He was great. I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. So I went back every day. Well, that speaker made a big mistake that Friday. He brought his daughter with him. Oh. And I took one look at her, and I was 17 years old, and I was like, man, I'm out of the game. And I ended up marrying her.
Okay.
We've been married for 23 years. Our oldest child is 22. We adopted her from overseas, not knowing she had severe special needs. And that's a lot of what actually ultimately brought me together with Tim Tebow and all of the incredible work that the Tim Tebow Foundation is doing for individuals with special needs or disabilities. And then very quickly after we adopted our daughter, the day of or the next day, we found out my wife was pregnant. So that son's now 19 years old. He's off at college. And then our youngest is 18 years old. He's a senior in high school.
Okay. Wow, what a cool story. And those are cool seeds that were planted years ago. Talk to us a little bit about Tommy growing up, though, before the college days, for the kids, before the Tebow Group. I believe we've all been given certain gifts, and these gifts have been given to us to be blessing, help to others. What would you feel like your super strengths or the gifts the Lord's given you, and how do you use those to bless and help people today?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I was that quintessential latchkey kid growing up, and some people don't know what a latchkey kid is. It's that kid that you come home from school by yourself, and there's no one there to let you in, and so you put the key in the latch and let yourself in the door. Became a big term in the 80s, the 90s, and so I was that latchkey kid. Why? Because my mom was working her freaking butt off, and so she was just trying to provide a life for us, and so I would just come home, and I had to just really entertain myself a lot, and I developed this insane curiosity just would read all the time, would build, would play. Started reading my mom's college textbooks when I was in elementary school. I mean, just absolutely loved learning, loved reading, loved building elaborate adventures for my G.I. Joes. You know, it's just whatever I could do to, you know, pass the time for myself. And I think those things have carried on with me. I've always just been very curious and always wanted to learn, always been able to learn very quickly. And those traits have certainly helped in business.
So curiosity, reading, ferocious like desire to learn and grow and build from a young age. Part of it sounds like out of, hey, you're just curious, and you know you're coming home and you're kind of by yourself, right? And so you're like, hey, I'm gonna just take advantage of this time and grow and learn.
Yeah,
that's really neat. And so fast forward, how about sports? Does sports play a role growing up at all? Were you?
Yeah, it did. Sports was a bit of a challenge for two things. You know, number one, I'm not very good.
Okay.
I wish I was. Actually, I have a fun soccer story. I got pretty decent at one point. I'll tell you that story next. But then also, my parents were divorced.
Okay.
And so going every other weekend to my father's house or going on most of the summer to my father's house, it meant typical sports like travel basketball or baseball. All those types of things were really difficult to do. So I played sports by myself and with my friends in the backyard all the time. But, you know, didn't get real serious about sports until middle school, high school. Actually became a pretty decent soccer player, played on one of the top travel teams in the Midwest or the Great Lakes. And we were a team from Michigan. We went down to Indiana for a tournament and made it all the way to the championship in this tournament. And then we got our butts kicked 7-1 in the tournament final. I mean, it was terrible. And I was the sweeper. That's the last defender before the keeper or the goalie. And these 7 goals weren't scored on our goalie. They were scored on me. This player I was playing against could do whatever he wanted with me. I could not do anything to defend against this guy. And so I walked away from that day. I was a senior in high school, or sorry, it was the summer before my senior year. I thought I was going to play soccer in college. I walked away from that day realizing I am not college material. That guy is college material. So I didn't end up playing soccer in college. It worked out. I started my first company when I was 19 years old. I probably would not have done that if I was playing soccer. But a decade later, I found out who that guy was that just destroyed me on the soccer field. Guy's name was DeMarcus Beasley, who went on to be one of America's greatest soccer players of all time, played in 4 World Cups for us. I mean, and so I was getting dominated not by a D1 athlete, but by one of America's greatest soccer players of all time.
Wow. That's incredible. So you get dominated by DeMarcus, you get humbled a little bit, but then second...
Beyond humbled.
But then second, you turn around and say, okay, maybe my focus is a little bit different. So you go on to college and you say, I'm going to focus. You start your business. You started a business.
Well, it really wasn't a focus. It happened very much by accident, many times over. And so I just knew I wanted to marry this girl. Remember, I'd met this girl
that became your business.
I was 17, and I'm trying to figure out how can I provide for her. You know, I sat down with her dad. I just turned 18 years old. And you know, he ended up building the largest church in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where we live. And so it was a little bit of a local fishbowl. And people would always ask me, what's it like to ask the pastor if you could marry his daughter? And true story, the third time went really well. So the first time I was barely 18 years old. I didn't officially ask him, could I marry his daughter? It was more of a conversation of, hey, what do I need to do to get myself in a position to marry your daughter?
Good question.
And he was so gracious. I mean, this man is truly a modern day saint. He was so gracious with me, Brett. He said, you know, Tommy, there's 2 things we expect anybody that would want to marry our daughter. You know, when you take your vows, you're going to say, I will provide for you and I will protect you. And so we just want to make sure that you have a plan for those things. And he said, you know, so like providing, like how do you plan to pay off student loans? How do you plan to get health insurance. And I just looked at him totally serious, Brett. I'm like, what's that? That poor man, he was just so patient with me.
Yeah.
Ended up marrying his daughter a couple years later. I was 20 at the time we got married. But in college, I was a triple major in Bible, youth ministry, and music.
Whoa.
And it turns out I'm absolutely awful at all three of those. And I hope someday to be good at my Bible. Odds of me being good at music are pretty low at this point. Although I do believe in a growth mindset, so maybe we'll get there with piano and guitar at some point. And then, youth ministry, I started out professionally in youth ministry, got burned out working with middle schoolers, but stayed on as a 20-year volunteer in our church with youth, and said I was going to put in my 20 years and then, take my pension, which was a little bracelet, like a jelly bracelet. But I did it. And so it was through that I wanted to marry this woman who I did marry eventually. I just needed a job. And so this guy from our church needed an intern. I was like, great, I'm in. I was burnt out on middle schoolers, needed a job. A few months into it, I realized he does this financial stuff. And so ended up falling in love with whatever this financial stuff was. We can get into that. And then through that, developed this entrepreneurial spirit. Again, just more of as a side hustle. Like, how can I generate a little extra cash? So ended up trying a few businesses. My first three went absolutely nowhere. And then my fourth ended up going nationwide like a rocket ship. And
Let's start there, right? So the curiosity, the learning, all of a sudden you find something that's like this new world that you weren't sure about, or maybe even aware of. And then someone kind of starts to teach you, bring on your ring, get a little bit mentored by them, and you start to just say, oh my gosh, this is maybe my calling. Take us to the moment when you were like, this is my calling, this is why I was put on earth to do this.
Yeah, I think, we're sitting down with a client at one point, and we're talking about their financial life. But through that, once they had shared their financial life, they were willing to talk about anything else in their life. So their marriage, their faith, their family, the things that I actually cared about talking about. And so what I realized in that moment was, oh, wow, if people will open up about their money, they'll open up about almost everything. And that was the light bulb moment for me. And I described that 25-year stint where I was a financial advisor. I described that stint really as a pastor in financial advisor's clothing, because I had the opportunity to talk with people at a level that most people will never get the opportunity to do. And it's just, I'm so grateful that people would trust me with kind of those innermost thoughts that they may not share with others. Really meant a lot. And it was a very fulfilling aspect of it.
I think that's so key to talk and focus on for a minute. John Maxwell talks about how he shifted from full-time ministry as a pastor of a church to basically, they call it going secular, right, where he just focused on leadership and writing books, focused on what's called the unchurched, if you will, right, church and unchurched, but really just going from exclusively Christian church to outside, and this transition that he had to go through. And he remember the calling that he felt towards that. And then now what's really cool is he's able to use the platform and use the good values and the leadership and the credibility that he's built over all these years and the Lord's blessed him with to be able to share the gospel, right? So talk about just that dynamic there where people can open up more, you can have a bigger impact in their lives, you can share with them, right? And even just the story of you coming to the Lord. I mean, was it something at a young age? Was it during college? Was it when you saw him met the girl, you're like, oh no, I got to be more like the dad? Like, what was your faith journey?
Yeah, so for me, ultimately came to faith in Christ right before high school. I was starting to make some, really silly choices as a late middle schooler, and ended up going to a Christian camp in high school, something my dad had invited me to go to. Met these incredible friends that just cared about me in a way I'd never experienced previously from friends. And it changed everything. Absolutely changed everything. I ended up changing high schools. There's just a lot of things that went into it. But fell in love with my Bible, fell in love with youth ministry, fell in love with music, the things that turns out I'm not so great at. But that was really the start. And then as moving into this role of financial advisor, I had the mindset of I'm not going to be a, quote, Christian advisor. Not casting stones at all. I have some very dear friends that are primarily, quote, Christian advisors, and they work mostly with Christian clients. I didn't want that to be what I did. I wanted to work with everybody. And then I loved my father-in-law's philosophy about faith. It was always invite, never insist. And it just gave me a framework for I'm going to be open about who I am and why, what makes me tick. That, that knowledge that ultimately Jesus died for me. Like, and once you grasp that, it changes everything that somebody would do that, that God of all people would send his son. I have 2 boys now. I just cannot fathom the love required to allow your son to die for someone else. And the fact that God would do that for me, how much does he love me that he would do that for me? And so I wanted that, I wanted to be open about that faith because it does drive everything in my life, or at least I hope it does, Brett. But I never wanted to be pushy or, people are on their own timeline with the Lord. And I wanted to be there to be available, to be open. And it was just a great way. I've had so many clients that were atheists or of different faiths and got along incredibly well with all of them. But for most of them, there was an opportunity at one point or another where they said, man, what is it that makes you tick? What makes you different? And I hope occasionally I had the courage to share with them what it really was.
Awesome, Tommy. It sounds like, Jesus changes everything about everything, right? And he did for your life. At the same time, you felt called, and it's not in conflict, called to serve all people, which is like Jesus served all people. Always invite, never insist. I love that thought and that philosophy. So, okay, so you fall in love with serving in the financial industry, right? And then you're like, okay, man, I also feel like I'm entrepreneurial. So let's launch. What is that launch with the rocket ship? Let's go there.
Well, so it really all started with this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, the whole point of the book was you need to not just make income from your own work. You need to make passive income that works when you're asleep. And so it was that quest for like, how do I get some money that works for me while I'm sleeping? And again, my father was a counselor and professor, and my mother was a teacher. So, I did not come from a financial background or really have any financial literacy growing up. So it was all just being learned as I went. And the concept of Rich Dad, Poor Dad was appealing of like, oh, okay, that's how people do it. And so that led me down the path of creating a direct-to-consumer business that was related to the insurance industry. I was a little bit ahead of my time and didn't know how to do sales and marketing at that point. And then moved into building real estate communities. I thought I was going to build a real estate community for older folks, but it turned into actually building real estate for individuals with special needs or disabilities. And that was before I had adopted our daughter. So there was already a little bit of understanding of, just some of the adaptations that could be helpful, things like that ended up being helpful later after we adopted our daughter. And then tried an ice cream store. And that was my best life example of market timing because it did it so poorly. What I figured out was when we were in the 70s or 80, from temperature standpoint, when we were in the 70s, we lost money. When we were in the 80s, we broke even. When we were in the 90s, we made money. The summer I opened that ice cream store, it only got into the 90s 3 times where we had opened it. And so it was just a disaster. So, we shut it down. The next summer is like the hottest summer in the last 20 years. Probably would have made a killing had we kept it open. But through that, we were trying to build that ice cream store in a way that we were going to franchise it as like the next Dairy Queen. One of my best friends is the largest Dairy Queen franchisor in the world. And, our whole concept was, we're going to build the next Dairy Queen. And so I learned a lot about systemization and all those things. And all these things are going to come back to be helpful later on. But as I was going through those initial businesses, I felt like such a failure. And there's a 3-year period we didn't know how to pay the bills. Like every week, I don't know how to buy groceries. And I'm so grateful. My in-laws were just there every step of the way to prop us up. They literally brought groceries. They literally brought a mortgage check for 3 years. For 3 years. And without that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today, Brett. So, but the business that took off like a rocket ship, I'd fallen in love with this financial space, even though under the hood, I was a financial train wreck personally. So I knew how to help other people, but one of the challenges in the financial industry is you can make a lot of money if you're willing to sell stuff that isn't great for other people. And it's a lot harder road to make good money if you're unwilling to do what's not right for somebody. And I just always had this rule of like, I want to treat people right. And my mentor in the financial industry, he always said to me, he's like, Tommy, just do the right thing for the client and the money will follow. Well, I just didn't understand that meant a 10-year journey before the money would follow. And so finally launched a financial firm with some colleagues from the industry that I knew, just young guys that were really hungry, really excited to grow something special. And we had a business decision to make. Where do we focus our energy in? And most firms in the financial world, they make their money working with business owners because traditionally business owners have more resources than other people from a financial standpoint. Well, every firm we knew that was successful with business owners had been around for at least 30 years.
Okay.
And so we were like, man, we don't have 30
how do you break
years
in? Yeah.
to build a pipeline and then wait for people to start having their exit event. We weren't smart enough like you to really focus on that exit time period where, I mean, part of what I love that you do, Brett, is come in with these business owners and say, hey, when you do that exit, how about we make it so you can actually keep a lot more of that or give it to the things you're passionate about instead of just paying taxes that you're not required to pay. And you were a lot smarter than we were to focus at that exit moment. We were like, we're going to take the client on day one and grow with them for 25 years until they have that exit. We just thought that's not going to work. And so we decided to specialize and build a niche practice serving some of the leading doctors in the world. And it was just a business decision at the time. I didn't know hardly any doctors. But we believe from a business decision, it was a repeatable, scalable market. And we decided to burn the ships and build everything around doctors. And we ended up, instead of having just a normal financial firm like an Edward Jones or something like that, what we had felt a lot more like a sports agent for doctors. It was, we would go in, we would help with negotiating their contract with the hospital or the medical practice. We'd help them when they started looking at a private equity buyout. We would help them with their entire financial life, their taxes, their insurance, their investments, planning for the future, figuring out how much do I need to set aside for college for my children versus paying off student loans. all those things. We just developed this really rich expertise because we were so niched. And today, a lot of people in the financial world niche pretty deep. But at the time we were doing it, we hadn't seen anybody else go that deep. And so we were paving the way. The other two innovations we were bringing, at least we didn't know of others doing this. One was we were building out a franchise-like model in the financial world. And so going back to that failed ice cream store, it ended up being a massive help because we were one of the first firms to really centralize the day-to-day grind and allow the financial advisor to primarily be a relationship manager. And by doing that, by centralizing the investment process, the tax process, the insurance process, all those things, the estate planning process, building out financial plans, by centralizing all that, we allowed our advisors to go a lot faster and do what only they could do, which is get out there and build those relationships.
So this is interesting, right? I heard a good quote by Rory Vade. He talks about you're most uniquely positioned to serve the person you once were, right? So thinking about where you were, right, and how you help the doctors, because a lot of doctors, they go to medical school, they don't go to business school, right? And then they're really good at medicine and they're passionate about it, but their financial IQ is not as high. Their IQ is through the roof, but having that, right? And so you know, being where your background, right, and the failing of the ice cream store, but really it's not a failing, it's just a learning opportunity, right? You're most uniquely positioned to serve the person you once were. And I imagine, too, the financial advisors who joined you, same thing, right? You say, hey, look, you focus on the relationships, you focus on the strategy and implementing the processes and the execution of it. Let us centralize it. I imagine that helped you to recruit to help those financial advisors also do their best work.
Yeah, absolutely. We would recruit people that had not been in the industry previously, and we would train them up. And so that's exactly what we were doing. We were saying, hey, look, nobody, even if they had experience, they didn't have that level of experience serving doctors. So we had to like untrain all the bad habits they'd previously learned if they were already in the industry. We just found it was easier to just build them up from scratch. And we also became one of the first firms in the country to move to mostly doing meetings by video conference. I'm talking back in 2008, 2009.
Wow.
We were doing most of our meetings by video conferencing. Actually, the audio quality was so bad. What we would do, we would send a link for the video conference, but we'd get them on their cell phones.
Through your phone, yeah.
Every time. But that allowed us, whereas I know some firms in the financial industry were not allowed to do video conferencing until COVID.
Wow.
So we were what?
Unique competitive edge.
10 years?
Yeah.
No. More than that.
Yeah, because 2020, right? It's 2021 right there.
Yeah. We were way ahead of that curve.
13, yeah.
That allowed us to grow nationwide.
Wow.
So if a doctor had a friend that they'd gone to residency with that was in a different part of the country, we could still get a referral.
Right.
And so,
and since you niche down, like it's not a hard overcome. And these doctors are also so busy with their schedules and whether they're working the nights or the days or they're on call. It's like, hey, if I can grab 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half on a video conference, wherever I'm at, they don't have to feel like they have to get dressed or go somewhere or try. I mean, it's just, if you think about it, it actually serves them better, right? Although being in person is amazing, right? And I'm sure you guys have opportunities to do that. But it's like if we can get more efficient, we can make an impact faster.
What we figured out was we could be about as 90% as effective over video conference compared to being in person. And what do I mean by effectiveness? Like the actual results of did that prospective client actually become a client? Our results were 90% as good over video conference, but it allowed us to scale at such a clip that it made way more than made up for that 10% we were losing by not being in person.
Right.
And it sounds, when I talk about it in hindsight, it sounds like I know what I was talking about. At the time we were doing it because we didn't want to have to fly all over the country. Right. We all had young kids. Yeah. And we were just like, man, there's got to be a better way where we don't have to fly everywhere. Right. So that's why we started doing the video conferencing. But it turned out to be ultimately better for us, for our children, for the business, and ultimately for the client, because once they got in that process, it was exactly what you're saying, Brett. They could just walk out of the OR operating room. For those of you not in the medical world, they could walk out of the operating room, jump on a, at the time it was like GoToMeeting or WebEx, and those have survived.
Yeah.
But they could just jump on one of those with us real quick, crank out a quick meeting, see our screen, talk on their speakerphone while they see our screen.
Hindsight's 20/20, right? It's just so funny how the norms of the way things have always been done, right? And those to break it are always the out of the box, or the rebels, or maybe they're not serving the way that the traditional way would be serving, and actually you're serving in a better way if you really got to it. And so absolutely love that. So that thing takes off like a rocket ship. You get how much? $2 billion under management approximately? What was the?
Yeah, we started with $6 million under management.
Okay.
And, we were working out of our garages.
Yeah.
No joke.
Okay.
And by the time I ended up exiting, which is a different chapter in the book, but by the time I exited, we were at $1.6 billion.
Wow. And how many years did that take?
Just about a decade.
Okay. 10 years.
Yeah.
And what percentage of what was the most growth? The last 3 years, or was it pretty steady? Like where year over year, like, boom, it just started to compound. It take 5 years and then it started to really hockey stick, or what's the feel for that?
It was a steady growth curve.
Okay.
It was a very steady growth curve. Yeah.
So transitioning now, okay? So you knocked that out of the park, right? You're married, kids. You talked about real estate piece of this. So is that during this, you're like, okay, I'm making all this money. I got to offset some of this tax by buying real estate and depreciating. Is that kind of the thought process? Or how'd you get into real estate?
That was a piece of it. I got into real estate because I read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and it basically said, you should do real estate.
Yeah.
And I did it. And Brett, I hated it. It was awful. And I'm not saying it's awful for everyone. And I invest in real estate today, but I actually do it through funds, specifically because I dislike it so much.
And specifically what we're referring to is active management of the real estate and ownership of doing it yourself, right? Where, you're outside of your gifting and your calling, which was serving in the financial industry at this point, right? And all of a sudden it's becoming maybe this distraction over here. And you're like, is that, I don't want the words in your mouth, but is that what it was?
It was the property management. It's the tenants not paying their rent this month. And I had such a huge heart. I'm like, oh, why not? Like, help me understand, and what's going on? How can we help them? And it was just, so I hated evicting people.
Yep.
Absolutely hated it. And really struggled with like how to do that with grace and in a way that's helpful for them, not harmful. But especially when there was a tenant that had small children. And again, from my background we didn't have a lot. So it was, I just didn't like it. And then we had some tenants that would cause some pretty significant damage to the properties. And, now all of a sudden, all the profits that we had are getting eradicated through damage and all those things. And I know there's a lot of great investors out there that do it really well. I just didn't want to be one of them.
Right. Well, we're literally recording the podcast at DLP Capital, right? Who part of what they do is unlock freedom for people who are actively managing properties to go into funds, right? And to be able to increase their cash on cash returns without any of the headaches, right? That's like what they're amazing at. And they do it at scale, right? They're going to do a 300 or 400 unit apartment complex, right? And they're going to be able to like really like dial in the person who's passionate about serving that community and those tenants. And so it's about gifting. We all have different gifting, right? Different focuses. And so, so real estate is a part of it, but it's also helping you to get the acumen, but you're also going to go towards, and we'll kind of move into like you meeting Tim and like kind of all how the Lord puts all these things together, right? You start to build for your special needs, right? And then you have a special needs daughter, and then fast forward, take us to the point where, okay, you and Tim somehow get together. I don't know. How did that all happen? Let's talk about that.
Well, it really started about a decade ago after I'd sold my side of the financial practice, had an exit, and now we're having to figure out what to do with ourselves. And I retired for 2 days, by the end of the second day, my wife was just pushing me out of the house saying, oh my gosh, you need purpose. Go do something meaningful.
Yeah.
And so I ended up spending 2 weeks just thinking about and praying about. She had asked me one of the most profound questions she could have possibly asked me. It was, what would need to change for you to keep working and loving it till you were 80? And I don't think she meant to be profound, but boy, that impacted me. So I thought about it, prayed about it for a couple weeks. I came back 2 weeks later, and I said 3 things. No more mean clients, no more neckties, and no more email. And she just looked at me. It's so funny, Brett. She's like, why haven't you been doing that sooner? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, she was so right. And so I did. I cut out mean clients, I cut out neckties, and I cut out email, and started to absolutely love work again. But at that time, we had also decided we did not need our own family foundation. We were very charitably inclined, had 5 things that we were wildly passionate about as a couple that we wanted to support. And we had decided we didn't need our own family foundation because all 5 of those things, 5 for 5, the Tim Tebow Foundation was already doing with excellence.
Wow.
And we had never met Tim, never expected to meet him. But the Tim Tebow Foundation checked all 5 boxes that we were already passionate about. And the thing that we knew was it was Tim's desire to fully cover the administrative costs of the Tebow Foundation so that when there was outside donors like my family, that 100% of our dollars would go directly to serving some of the most vulnerable people around the globe, and frequently some of the most vulnerable children around the globe. And so for us, very quickly, it just became a business decision. Why would we start over something from scratch when we'd have to build and, we'd have all the overhead? Tim's already covering it. Why not just throw in with him? He seems trustworthy. We've never met him. Don't expect to, but seems like a trustworthy guy. And so that's really where it started about a decade ago. And, we were just observers from a distance and continued to be wildly impressed by everything that Tim was up to. And through some really cool God moments along the way, I ended up becoming good friends with some of Tim's team. And then a couple of years ago, got a phone call saying, hey, we need somebody to run the for-profit side of Tim's world, the business side, so that he can spend more time on the nonprofit side, specifically more time working on rescue operations for vulnerable children. And when we found out some of the work that they're doing under the hood that I can't even talk about publicly, but real meaningful operations where they're taking a child from some of the worst evil and harm's way imaginable and bringing that child to a point of safety and hope for a much brighter day in the future. When I found out those things, I couldn't say no.
Praise God, you didn't say no. And now, fast forward, you guys to talk about it. In fact, we were talking at the Wellspring at Boca at an event we were just about a month ago, and so Tim and you guys and the team all sit down and say, hey, this is the next kind of vision the Lord's given them for the Tim Tebow Foundation, and the financial and the building that to focus, and then Tim to focus even more on that. So take us to that and how you guys have evolved and the teams have evolved over the years to further, I guess, be in your strengths, right? And be in your calling, be in your lane. Talk about that, especially as someone who's been a dynamic leader in your own business, and Tim being a dynamic leader. Like, talk about the best ways that teams could do that. Think about like David, in the Bible, and what's Saul's son? What's his name again? Jonathan, right? Jonathan. I think about even just the different apostles, or just different people have different it's called business partners, right, or life partners, right, where they're doing life together, but they're doing it in their own lane. So talk about that and how that's kind of evolved over the years.
Yeah, it's been such a joy to work with Tim and his wife Demi Lee. They're just so driven And I mean this. Tim is one of the most driven, intense humans I've ever met, and he married someone equally as driven and intense. Demi Lee is just phenomenal. And they both just have these uncanny instincts for business and for strategy. And let me give you an example. Part of what the Tim Tebow Foundation has done is, it's all launched as Tim was still a professional athlete. And so the way the foundation evolved was Tim realizing I can't go do the day in and day out work. I have to find incredible people to help support that. And so they went out, and Tim never called it mergers and acquisitions as we would, but he had this innate sense of, I'm going to go look for the best of the best in a particular area of serving some of the most vulnerable people around the globe, or some of the most vulnerable children. And he would find what they thought was hopefully the best of the best, and they would build a relationship over a 4 or 5 year period. And if they proved they really were elite at that ministry function, then Tim and his team would say, okay, come under our umbrella. We'll take care of all of your marketing, all of your accounting, all of your legal, all of your fundraising. Just come under the Tim Tebow Foundation umbrella, and you just go be really, really great at ministry the way that you already are. So in the business world, what I would say he was doing was creating a shared services model and platform, and doing it through M&A, mergers and acquisitions. It's really what he was doing. Never sat down and said strategically, like, oh, this is what I'm going to do over the next decade of my life. But today, the Tim Tebow Foundation has over 26 ministry partners that are just world class at what they do. And some of those are fully under our umbrella at the Tim Tebow Foundation. Others we're still testing and vetting to see, are they as great at what they do as what we think they are? And so that was happening innately. And on the other side of that, Tim had this innate business sense of just, and I don't even want to call it business sense. Tim had this unnormal approach of actually doing what he said he was going to do, and through that building this incredible relationship with the market of trust. And I really believe that. I knew that from a distance. I'd never met the man, and yet decided I didn't need my own family foundation because I trusted him. And so the Tebow name just brings a level of trust that's not normal.
So talk about that for a second, like stewardship, right? So you stewarded, the wealth for a lot of families, and even the RAs to build up the systems, the process to help them steward the wealth, right? You have this retirement moment for 2 days. You have this calling of, now you want to be able to bless these 5 areas of ministry. Tim's already doing it, right? And now this moment comes, they're like, okay, we want to hand over a lot of the stewardship of the investment, right? And so talk about how, you were faithful in, and I won't say these weren't small things. These were big things, but, built up. But now it's this even a bigger thing, because it is part of it's Tim's name, right? It's Tim's credibility. It's what Lord's blessed him with, his faithfulness, right? So you're becoming a part of that, right? So walk us through that stewardship mindset and practice, and any kind of wisdom for those that are out there that are wanting to, have a higher level of credibility and trust.
Yeah, Brett, I don't want to make it about Tim. I think all of us that are walking around saying our faith in Jesus is what matters and guides our lives need to recognize our actions, what we say, what we do, it doesn't just represent us. It represents more than us. And one of our family values that we'd tell our children every Wednesday when we drop them off to school, because we'd tell our children a different value every day of the week. But Wednesday's family value was remember who you represent. And it meant you don't just represent yourself. You represent our family. You represent our church. You represent Jesus. You represent your grandfather, who's this one of the most trusted men in our city because of his reputation for doing the right thing. And And so that's really the approach that I've tried to live my life. And that's the approach that we ask our team to live by as well. Look, it's not about Tim and Demi Lee. And they would say that before anyone. I just respect and appreciate their humility so much that they recognize, look, our platform comes from the Lord. We're here to steward it. And they do that so well. But that's what we want our team to understand. Look, it's not about us. You represent our team. You represent yourself. You represent your family. And it just impacts the way that you operate with everyone. I'm wearing, I don't know if anybody can see it, but those of you that are watching, you can see I'm wearing this sweatshirt today, and it says the Tebow Group. You better believe when I'm walking through the airport and I'm wearing that, I recognize I represent more than myself to everyone I'm encountering in this airport because I'm putting that name on my sweatshirt, but it's way bigger than that. Shouldn't we all be doing that every day with Jesus on our sweatshirt and realizing, no, we represent the King of Kings. Let's represent him with excellence. And Brett, what I like to hope is that as I represent Jesus with excellence, and I hope to do that more often than not, that would also represent Tim and Demi Lee with excellence.
Beautiful. Well said. I love that. Let's shift a little bit now for exactly what the Tebow Group does, right? So people can have a clear understanding of that. Tebow Group and then the Tim Tebow Foundation, right? So make that really clear, and then focus on what do your day-to-days look like these days, and what's kind of what are some of the goals and the visions for the Tebow Group?
I love it. Well, let's start with the end in mind. The most important thing for all of us, whether it's at the Tim Tebow Foundation, we call that TTF, or at the Tebow Group, we call that TTG. All of us, all of our team, I like to think the reason that we come to work in the morning is to serve some of the most vulnerable people around the globe. And we do that in 5 main areas: adoption, care, and prevention, children with profound medical needs, special needs, people with special needs or disabilities, and then anti-trafficking and child exploitation. And then ultimately, we have this incredible ministry campus called Rising Light Ridge, where it all kind of comes together. And so
the Poconos Mountains out in Pennsylvania, right?
It is. Yeah. It is. You've been a part of that, and we're so grateful to you and so many others that have helped to make that happen. But so those main areas, think of it as what the foundation is up to day in and day out, is they are there to bring faith, hope, and love to those needing a brighter day in their darkest hour of need. And that mission was really laid out in Tim's heart at the very beginning. He just felt like, this is what God has called me to.
Beautiful. So Tim Tebow Group. So, sorry, you keep going. I kind of cut you off.
Yeah, on the Tebow Group side, TTG side, our mission is to fuel and amplify faith, hope, and love. And I like to think of the fuel side as putting the financial gas in the tank. Remember, one of Tim and Demi Lee's goals is to be able to fully fund the overhead, the administrative overhead of the foundation, so that when everybody else is chipping in, that all of our dollars could go directly to serving some of the most vulnerable people. So when we say to fuel and amplify faith, hope, and love, the fuel side is we're putting financial gas in the tank. And the amplify side is we've been trusted to steward Tim and Demi Lee's audience and to make sure that we understand, why has this audience chosen to give us their eyeballs, their attention, their energy? How can we meet their needs? And as their needs are met, how can we help pull them into the fight for some of the most vulnerable people? And we always like to say it's not about us. It's not so much that we want to get them involved with the Tim Tebow Foundation, although we love it when people choose to do that. We want to get them caring about the things that break God's heart, some of the most vulnerable people. And if that happens to be with us, awesome. And if that happens to be elsewhere, awesome.
I love that. Care about what the things that break God's heart, and then steward the audience, right, for awareness and the opportunity to give, right, and to be a part of it. Kind of get back to where you're at when you had your exit, and you're saying, and you've been given to the Tim Tebow Foundation, right, and who's doing it with excellence, who's doing it with with the best of the best, stewardship of the capital, with the payment or the funding of the admin side covered, right? So that, to amplify, that's what you guys are focused on. So you guys are doing all the investments for Tim, your family office, his family office, and so are you bringing other capital, or walk through that, or like what does it look like day to day, for your guys' vision for the T group? What are you doing besides creating more wealth within that side?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Brett. So when we do the investment function, we call that purposeful investing. And what I absolutely love about it is we are looking for opportunities that have both profit or income potential, but more importantly, they have a strong mission focus. And I'll give you some examples. We love finding companies that are using technology to fight human trafficking. I want to invest in that. So listeners, if you have technology like that, please get in touch with us. We want to talk with you. If I saw technology that was going to make life better for individuals with special needs or their families, I would want to look at that. And when I see opportunities that are moving the needle to share the good news about Jesus, I want to invest in those. And what I think is different, if you look at a lot of, quote, impact investing, a lot of it has been done on a concessionary basis. It's just a big word to me. People are doing it saying, I think my returns are going to be lower. I know I'm going to make less money because I care about something incredible. We are trying to say, I don't believe that thesis. My thesis, our thesis, is I think we can make a great profit that we can pour back into the fight. But I think we can do that caring about some really awesome things. And we either do that ourselves. There's three ways we do it, Brett. Either we do investments ourselves. So we'll do direct investments into incredible companies, and then we'll put our energy behind them. Or we will set up a fund where our friends can come along with us and do this with us, or partner with a fund and do that same thing. And we have awesome opportunities. One of our funds, it's technology that only invests in, it's a fund that only invests in technology that's fighting human trafficking. Another one is a fund that only invests in faith-led founders of AI and robotics companies. I mean, I pinch myself. I get to do this stuff day in and day out. We also have some sports funds. So they invest in sports teams, whether professional or minor league. And, we also have a fund that is GovTech. So they're investing in things that can help the government. And the reason we want to help the government, at the core function, it's there to help our vulnerable population. So if we can provide technology that allows the government to more efficiently provide services for some of our most vulnerable populations, that's a really good thing to us. And so we partner with, those are funds where we're actually involved day in and day out. And then we also have incredible fund partners that we believe in that are doing really big things that we just write a check and we say, we trust you to know this domain. Great example, we're sitting here today in DLP's office, as you mentioned. They are one of our trusted real estate partners because I don't want to invest in real estate personally.
Yeah,
that's not my gifting.
They're like, hey, Tommy, we started real estate. And you're like, no, the one fund we're not starting is real estate. I'm not going to do it. And they're like, what do you mean? They're like, let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about this tenant and this thing. And so exactly. So so again, you're being an amazing steward with what the Lord's given you, and you, and I mean collectively.
We're trying.
Tim,
we're trying.
And the team to focus on the things that are going to be the highest and best excellence, right? Even within these funds, what you're saying, right? With tech, with faith-led founders, AI and robotics, sports funds. Imagine sports. Tim has a little insight on that. And then government tech. I think that's so fascinating. And on top of that, you're also saying, okay, well, who else can we partner with? It doesn't have to be a box, right? You can be creative in this whole endeavor. So this is really cool. So does like accredited investors, are they able to, join and invest with the Tebow Group? Walk us through that? Like, how does that work?
Our website, tebowgroup.com, will show listeners what we're up to if somebody wants to see if there's an appropriate investment for them. And hopefully they're talking with their advisors to make sure that it's the right fit for them. But if they want to explore that, that's a way they can get access to what we're up to and the partners we're working with. We try to do a pretty good job of getting them connected with what we think is best for them. And sometimes that ends up meaning they become part of the crew we roll with to do our investments with.
That's fantastic. So let's shift a little bit to taxes. We're running out of time, right? I know we touch on that. So talk about capital gains tax a little bit, right? I mean, you exit your massive company, right? And you probably had other exits as well, and you've had other people have big exits. What has been the biggest frustration when it comes to capital gains tax planning and/or the exit? In your opinion, and maybe what are some of the key strategies that you've used to either for yourself or for others?
Yeah, great question, Brett. And first, I think I want to back up because I think it's important people embrace a tax philosophy, and so that's important to me because from a biblical standpoint, those of us coming from a faith worldview, it's pretty clear: give to Caesar what is Caesar's. So the question is, what is Caesar's? Well, there was a judge back in, I don't even know when, long time ago, and he wrote this incredible opinion about taxes. Let me grab my phone here. I'm going to read it. And I love what he said because it's really guided my tax philosophy. And, when I sat down with Tim talking about how do you want your businesses to operate from a tax standpoint? Do you want to be aggressive? Do you want to be conservative? All those things. I love Tim's answer so much, Brett, and it's not going to surprise anyone out there. Tim said, Tommy, I just want to do what's right. He makes my life so easy. And so I want to read you what this judge, his name is Learned Hand, great name, and Judge Hand said, anyone may arrange his affairs so that his taxes shall be as low as possible. He is not bound to choose that pattern which best pays the treasury. There's not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. Over and over again, the courts have said that there's nothing sinister in so arranging affairs as to keep taxes as low as possible. Everyone does it, rich and poor alike, and all do right. For nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the law demands. I thought that was so good, Brett. It really has informed my tax philosophy over the years. It helps define what is Caesar's if we want to do right. And I'll give you an example. When I violated that policy, and I feel really good about it, I had an opportunity because I was traveling so much as we were building this nationwide company. I had the opportunity to claim pretty much any state in the country as my personal residence. Well, that meant I could go to Tennessee, Texas, Florida, which all have no income taxes. And that would reduce my tax bill pretty significantly. As I thought about it, though, I have a special needs daughter receiving incredible care from our local school district. And so many other services that we're so grateful that our tax dollars contribute to. And even though legally I would have been fine to not pay state taxes in the state where I live, I just didn't feel good about it. And so we did the opposite. We decided we're going to pay more taxes than we're legally required to pay because we actually value and appreciate the services that are being provided. And I'm not saying everybody should do that, but I do just like to say, our taxes do a lot of really important things that we care about. And yes, is there a ton of waste and inefficiency? Of course. But with that backdrop of a philosophy, one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is what are tax effective strategies that we can utilize. And obviously, Brett, that's what your business does so well. If somebody's thinking about exiting a company, your company comes in and helps show them, hey, these are ways you can do that a lot more efficiently. And so you can actually have the dollars go to what you want them to go to. And I think that's brilliant. I think it's the way to go. For me, what I think about a lot is after you've had that exit, now what are new strategies we can continue to deploy to grow those dollars on a tax advantage basis? And nothing I'm about to say do I mean as tax advice. Like, please go talk to your own CPA. Make sure, you vet this out with them. But some of the things I get really excited about, two things. One is what's called Section 1202, which I was in the investment world for over 20 years, and I'd never heard about this thing. And what Section 1202 is, it's all about qualified small business stock. And as you invest in companies that have the potential to change the world, so usually these are what we'd call venture capital type companies, smaller tech startups typically. If you do it wisely, that investment can grow up to 10x or $10 million, whichever's greater, totally tax-free. And I don't know why nobody's talking about this, because the whole point of the legislation was America thinks it's good if we build and become innovators in America. Imagine that. There's a reason most of the massive technology developments of the last 20 years have happened here in America. And we've said that's good for business. Let's incentivize that.
Them to keep these pour fuel on fire.
Yes. So up to 10x or $10 million, whichever is greater. When have you ever heard about a tax thing that it says whichever is greater in favor of the client? I mean, it's just some of the most generous tax legislation that we have. And it just requires a few simple things: that you're investing in a U.S. company that's a C Corp or an LLC taxed as a C Corp. It has to have less than $50 million in assets. And you got to hold it for 5 years or more. So think of like a normal capital gain as a 1-year hold. This is a 5-year hold. And if all those boxes are checked, then when you go sell this thing, again, 10x or $10 million, whichever's bigger, you get to keep tax-free.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. And the key is that planning, right? And making sure that you're A, awareness, and B, planning, and you have everything in order, and working with professionals that are aware of this and have executed it, right?
Yeah.
I think where people get in trouble is they don't plan, and they don't think. They're so busy building the business or the real estate or investing in the Bitcoin, and it's just all going, although that wouldn't qualify for this type of thing. But whatever it is, and you're going to exit, and then you have this massive tax.
Yes.
And so the planning, the preparation, having the team in place, so important. Do you want to finish the thought on 1202?
Yeah, just the last thought is, I love sharing this story, Brett, because somebody out there listening is holding on to an investment they made. They're already eligible for this, and they're just now hearing about it. Here's the beautiful news. This is not one where you had to pre-file for it 5 years ago or 7 years ago. The time you document this ultimately is at the exit of that position or that investment. So yes, they're going to need to do some back work to make sure they can validate, was this company a C Corp? Have I held it for 5 years? All those types of things. But somebody out there listening just found out that they're going to be able to grow $10 million of an investment tax-free. And the only thing I would ask, I hope you would consider getting in the fight with some of those dollars for some of the most vulnerable people out there.
And that's basically the theme of this podcast and why we named it Investing for MVPs, right? So the ability to multiply that wealth and to multiply freedom and impact to serve and bless MVPs. Give more, all of it away is the entire part of Built to Billions podcast. We're totally out of time. We're going to go in the lightning round real fast, but Was there a second strategy that you wanted to mention? I didn't know. I wasn't sure.
Well, we ran out of time. Maybe I'll come back.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll save that one. You have to wait for that other one. So quickly on the lightning round. Are you ready to go?
Yes, sir.
All right. Number one book you've recommended most in the past year, you're reading that you're loving and that you're giving away, or you just loved.
The Mission Possible devotional.
Okay.
And that's not just because it's by Tim Tebow. I think
okay.
it's actually really, really great.
No, yeah, I'm sure it's fine. You have to preface that. I'll check that one out. I didn't know you had that one. That's why you mentioned it. Question number 2, number 1 leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by.
Uncommunicated expectations are disappointments waiting to happen.
That's perfect. Question number 3, what are you most curious about right now?
I've been really diving deep into the book of Amos. I don't even know if I said it right. Amos.
Amos. I think it's Amos.
But I've been diving really deep into that book. Here we have a shepherd that maybe he was a pretty significant, influential businessman. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But he decides to go and launch his ministry in the Southern Kingdom instead of the Northern Kingdom where he was from. And so we have this historical missionary that was using business as a mission possibly. And I'm like, man, I want to understand this guy.
I got to jump into Amos, brother.
Yeah.
Next question, biggest frustration with the 1031 exchange?
Oh, the timing. Yeah. Every time I've tried to actually execute one of these things, Brett, the timing has just been a disaster of finding the replacement property. It's like it never matches up. Either we have the replacement property, but we're not ready to sell quite yet, and then we're trying to figure out, and every time I'll go talk to the experts about a reverse, or we're sold and we haven't found the replacement property yet, and then I got to go talk to the experts and figure out like what's our option if we haven't found it yet. And yeah, I feel like it's a moving target.
That's why we offer the best 1031 exit plan. So you have both options of a regular 1031, or you can solve it with a deferred sales trust to save into it. But yeah, those are some of the biggest ones. They're so frustrating. Last question, and this will wrap up the show. And first of all, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your gifts and your talents, your wisdom with us. Thank you for fighting the good fight. Thank you for following the Lord's guidance and being faithful in all these years. And thank you for fighting for MVPs, right? But this is the last question. How do you best stay centered in your values and encourage to charge forward every time you conquer kind of a new mountain here to keep going?
I married a rock star who keeps me humble more often than not. She's just so good at keeping me centered on what matters most, Brett. I would be a very different man without her.
We'll keep serving her and keep listening to her, and I think you'll be in good hands, my friend. Tommy Martin, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. God bless you. Also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build It to Billions podcast. Again, we're here on this journey to scale from millions to billions so we can give more, all of it away. And we want to encourage you to do the same thing. Like Tommy said, you have a massive exit. Look at 1202. You have a massive passion. Give now. Figure out ways to give in an efficient way with tax. And ultimately, do what the Lord's calling you to do for your life. We want to encourage everyone to do that, take action. So appreciate everyone watching today. Please rate, review, subscribe, share this with someone it can make a big impact for, and we'll talk to you all again real soon. Bye now.